Okay, we're back at Epic Exchange's YouTube channel where we are welcoming yet another guest. And today we have Angel on the show. And Angel is an author from our recent book, The Gift in Your Story. And I'm so excited, Angel, that you're here today to share your story with our audience. Why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Thanks, Kelly. I'm so excited to be here. And again, I'm Angel Baney. Um, I have one daughter, three cats, and a husband. And I live on the eastern coast of the United States. Yeah, so yeah, that's me.
Okay. I love how you prioritized the people and animals in your life in that order. Well, Angel, why don't you just start by sharing your story with everyone?
Great, I'd love to. Yeah, so I came from a pretty typical uh, family. There was four children. We are all pretty close in age, and my parents came from immigrants from Italy mostly. My father's father was the only one who was not from the United States, from Italy. So we grew up with that big Italian tradition of always having family gatherings and eating at the table together, and a lot of loud voices. And growing up, my parents just did everything for us, tried to make it the best life that we could have. We grew up on a street where everybody's parent was your parent. So when you did something bad, six other parents knew, and you got grounded by every single one of them, right? You were like, so it was really a fantastic childhood. But like everyone, as you're growing up, you go through these stages. And I was a swimmer, and I wanted to be an Olympic swimmer. That was my dream through high school. But as I got into high school, things kind of didn't feel right for me. I was told by teachers that I wasn't smart like my sister, that I wouldn't be as good as her. Now, you know, we had communication in our family, but it wasn't the kind of communication where you felt like you could tell your parents everything. I didn't feel like I could go to my mom and dad and say, this is what the teachers are saying to me, because their whole framework was get good grades, go to college. Everyone has to go to college. So I felt like if I whined and complained about what was being done to me at school, that I would be seen as, I don't know, something other. So I made up for it by becoming class president and, being on student council. And I started working a lot, because that was my way of escaping not being able to go after my dream. And I knew the only way that I could become a college person is if I made the money, because my parents didn't have the money to send me. And quite frankly, my grades weren't good enough to get scholarships like my sister. And that's when I made the decision that I would have to fend for myself probably all of my life. Didn't want to depend on anyone else. And I would work as hard as I could, right? But did I work as smart as I could? And then after I started college, I realized, wow, I just really didn't learn in school how to be here. And so I worked 3 to 4 jobs. And I don't think it's possible to work 3 to 4 jobs and go to school, because I wanted to be a marine biologist. And that takes a lot of studying. So that's the point at my life where I really thought I was a failing. I couldn't pass school. All I was doing was working night and day, not any sleep. So my self-esteem just really, really started to shrink. So when my boyfriend in college said, I have to quit school and leave, do you want to go back to Massachusetts with me? I thought, here's my opportunity to escape, right? Because I was never, well, in my younger years, I might have been a little bit, but I wasn't the type of person that really thought about ending my life that way, right? So I thought, I was always an escape artist. Like if I couldn't do something, I would escape into something else. And so I thought, this is my escape. And I told my parents, and they were devastated. They were like, their words were pretty much, you're not going to make anything of yourself if you quit college. So then again, my self-esteem went low. And I realized now at this time, I had really no communications with my siblings. They each were on their different path. And there's stories that have come up now, and I realize why we all kind of stopped communicating and going on our different paths. We all loved each other, but we didn't really have that close knit talking to one another like we had growing up. So I went off to Massachusetts and I started working really hard. And like about 2 years later, I found out that as I was working night and day, my boyfriend was cheating on me. And so I was in the catering business at this point. I had worked for a few restaurants, built myself up to manager, general manager, but I hated it. It was fast food kind of pizza, but it was like a little bit more family style. So it was like a sit down restaurant. But I thought catering might be more fun. And that's where I met my first husband. And what happened was just this cycle of emotional abuse, but it was like a slow grooming. And I never understood that word until maybe about a year ago, about what grooming really was. You always thought grooming was for like a young child that happened with like a predator. But grooming can happen in any part of your life, if you're unaware of it. So he was grooming me little by little to become kind of like his only one. And we eventually got into this relationship where I lived with him, I worked with him, I lost contact with all my friends. I didn't really even tell my parents much of anything. When they called or I called, I pretty much said, everything is great with a happy voice, but it wasn't. I was in this cycle of repeatedly being abused emotionally and physically. And there was times when he would just leave for days and I would have to run not only our deli, but our restaurant also and take care of some of the catering that we did. And because of the way he had groomed me, I didn't think anybody would love me. Like people always ask, well, why don't you leave? It's not that easy though. And like I said, I had a loving family. My father did not abuse my mother, but the self-esteem problem came from other places. Sometimes it can come from friends. Sometimes it can come from teachers. Sometimes it can come from a stranger, right? And we don't realize the cycle we're getting into until sometimes it's too late. So, a few years went by and we finally had to move back because we lost everything. My parents took us back in. They knew that there was something wrong, but I had not told them everything. And we eventually moved out because we were always fighting. And my parents were like, we don't want to hear the yelling, screaming. We found our own place. And eventually the drinking, because he liked to drink, got more. The abuse got to be shorter periods of time. And that was another thing that I didn't explain that probably happens in the cycle of domestic violence, is that a lot of women are in this and your abuser's not abusing you every day, right? They go into cycles. So for my ex, it was like, okay, he would abuse me and then months would go by and it would be a beautiful relationship. And I would think, wow, it's so normal. But then it would happen again. And what happens is the duration gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And so as this duration was getting shorter, I finally moved out, but I went back one more time to get my stuff. And that's the day that he tried to kill me. And I did escape with my life. And that from that day on, I decided that no more. I would never let anyone, not a man, not a woman, abuse me in that way. And it took some years of help and recovery and just finding out who I was again. But I eventually started to like myself again and realized that I was worthy of being loved. And so I hooked up with my boyfriend from college, not the same one I moved to Massachusetts with, but he actually went to my high school, lived close in my neighborhood, and we eventually hooked up again and got married. And here I am today with this beautiful little 8-year-old girl that we tried to have for 10 years. And I pivoted from body work into this great space of meeting people and helping them with communication and how parents can really speak with their children and communicate so that they have that strong bond, so they will become the number one confidant when their kids get into any kind of problem like this, emotionally, physically, and say, Mom, Dad, I need your help. Because that's what my passion is. And I feel like that is so important in our lives, especially in today's world. So thank you, Kelly. That's my story.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And there's a lot that you shared in there. Um, so I guess the first question that I have for you is, you mentioned this journey that you're on now, helping parents with and children communicate in a more positive way. Is that because you really feel that the way that you communicated with your parents and your family uh, wasn't that great, and maybe could have helped you avoid the low self-esteem and maybe even falling into those abusive relationships?
Yes, you know, we all have these different personalities. And in order to relate to one another, we have to understand why maybe you like things that are orange and I like things that are yellow. Well, if we can figure out why you like things that are orange and I can step out of my yellow color and step into your orange, then I can understand you and respect you instead of saying, well, I can't believe you don't like yellow. Like, I mean, what is wrong with you? Everybody should do this and that. And at some point, that communication happened where all I was hearing was, I needed to go to college, but I knew in my heart that it wasn't for me. I just couldn't figure it out, and once I got there and I couldn't deal with it, it was like, I can't go back and tell my parents. They're going to be so disappointed, which they were. And for many years, I was told, I can't believe you quit college. Even into my 40s, can't believe you ever quit college.
So
So, yeah,
has your relationship with your parents changed now that you have are learning better ways of communicating with your own child? Have you been able to maybe open up those lines of communication in with that upper generation now?
I will tell you. So, my parents just both turned 79 this year, right? And there was months that we didn't see them. We didn't celebrate Christmas, which is a big deal for our family, but because of COVID, right?
Hmm.
And um, because of the method that I've learned and, the training that I'm using now in the bank methodology, I was able to understand my parents' values. And I always saw them as so different. But yeah, it was amazing that, you know, I don't agree with them on everything. In fact, there's a lot that I don't agree with them. But I've stepped out of my ego and said, I understand where they're coming from and how they were raised. And wow, now that I see what they're seeing through their eyes, I can really talk with them with respect instead of having the fights and going, oh, why don't they just get me? And I'm not saying that it's perfect, because it will never be perfect, because we totally don't agree on some things. But I can't force them to see what I see, because not only are they an older generation, but it's not for them to see my way all the time. It's really for me to have the emotional intelligence to step out of my ego and step into theirs to have that relationship right now.
Right. That makes so much sense because and the truth is that none of us can see exactly through anybody else's eyes what their experience is, what their filters are, all of those things. And so all we can ask is to have that empathy and have that understanding that we're all going to have different viewpoints, and how do we find that common ground?
Right. I think in today's society too, it's so important. I mean, I know you're in Canada and I'm here in the States, but where I live in this area, we have one of the highest populations of older folks. And Pittsburgh is a very traditional, family oriented area. So, what does that mean? Traditions is huge here. You don't break traditions, you don't break up families, and you don't break up like procedures and methods. And a lot of the people that live in this area, because they went through the steel mills and losing jobs, because Pittsburgh totally turned around from being this factory working steel mills to tech, right? We're bringing in people because of CMU. We're bringing in tons of technology and stuff. But the older people, because they're so set in their traditions, it's really hard for them. And
Right.
so, it's been a really hard time with COVID because they're set in their ways. And so a younger generation might look at it and go, oh, they're just stubborn and da da da. But if they can step out of their ego once again and understand how they grew up, and it might not be correct, but if they can understand how they grew up and speak to them with the emotional intelligence, it's really such a big deal. And I'm seeing that more and more as I use this methodology of, wow, how we can really get along if we really want to, right?
Right. Can we talk for a second about how you're helping parents and children communicate better? So, can we talk about how you and your daughter changed your communication during this past year, as you were on this journey yourself?
Yeah, so it's been fun. So, we have these four cards that we use, and that kind of gives you the code of the personality. So once I did that, I found out that I was a totally different code than her, because we were fighting and I was screaming, raising my voice. um, and I was stressing her out, making her cry. And then I went back and went, oh my God, that's my childhood, right? Of sometimes having those
Mm.
tears or being scared when my mom would scream at us. And I was doing the same thing to my child. So once I started stepping out of my personality, I'm totally nurturing, but she's such an action child. She goes, 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 moves, moves, moves. Once I understood that, I was like, oh, I get the way she needs to learn at home at this time. I get that she needs these breaks to run around the house like, um, just letting off steam. I get that she needs to bounce on a ball consistently to just get her body going, right? And once I did that and I made little pockets of time for her to do that, our relationship is, again, not perfect because we do have breakdowns. I mean, it happens, right? But we just have this fun together now. And even if she gets mad at me, I know a way of breaking that pattern to get her to laugh really quickly. And so Gianna in the other regards is like learning this system too, because the younger the kids learn this, then they can step out of their ego and look at their friends and go, oh, I get why you don't want to do this when I'm bossing you to do this. Or
Right.
I understand why I can't be late when you set a play date because that makes you anxious and nervous, right? And just other things that we can use to really help these kids and their parents to have a better relationship.
Right. Now, how does this work that you're doing with parents and children connect with your passion for helping people who have been in situations of emotional, physical abuse?
So Going back to that strong bond, right? If your children trust you because you understand them, you understand that they are who they are, that you are not trying to mold them into what you want to be. Once you know that children are their own little people and you understand their personality and you're able to adjust to their personality, but also, within boundaries, then I know that once you become their confidant, they can come to you with their problems. They're not going to social media and going, I think I'll text out to my friends information that might help me. Or I'm not going to TikTok to see how that person's solving their problem, right? I
Right.
mean, in this day and age of informational overload, um, in fact, I was just reading a report about the increase of depression in these kids because of electronics.
Hmm.
Scary. It's
Yeah.
really scary. So I think at this time right now, especially with 1.5 million women leaving the workforce and maybe losing their jobs and never getting them back, it's really important that while we're at home, we understand that, yes, we may be stressed, but we may be stressing our child out. And that's going to be a stepping stone for future stressors, because whatever patterns we lay down right now in their life is just going to continue on with more intensity. So now is the time to start young, teach these children the methods to get along, create these strong bonds, teach parents how to step out of their egos and look at their kids and what their kids need instead of what they want their kids to have. And
And
then we can form these dynamics.
and so does that then support their self-esteem and their ability to say, no, you can't talk to me that way. You can't treat me that way.
Yes.
Because you have listened to them. You've trusted them. They trust you.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I love about this program is it's all about raising emotional intelligence, right? And what are all the studies saying? EQ is more important for IQ,
Mm.
more important than IQ right now, right? Because you can't change your IQ, you know. You can use it in different ways to become successful, but if you don't have that EQ, you're not going to go out in society and be something great.
Hmm.
We need to get these kids to have EQ so they can step out in society and create the greatness that they're meant to have. And we can only do that by teaching both the parents and children. It all starts with these parents.
So you shared your story, a big part of this in the book,
Yeah,
and now you're out there sharing it to further your passion and your business and everything. Why is it so important for you to share your story? Because you could potentially do this work without sharing your personal story.
because I think that the passion of mine to end the cycle of domestic violence, without me sharing my story and showing that how I was able to um, regain my self-esteem and leave that relationship finally. Yes, it took a long time. That it will help other women say, okay, there's somebody else, and my story may be the same or different, but she shared her story, so this is going to give me the strength to either find me or find someone that can really help them get out. And I think also if younger girls read this story, probably not someone as young as my daughter, 8, but teenage girls, if we give them our stories, it will challenge them to have a voice and really say, we're not going to take this anymore. Like, and it all has to do not just with the cycle of domestic violence, but equality for women, of, um, you know, just being able to be who you are in
Right.
your passion. And, when you share your story, no matter what your story is, if it changes one life, that's all that mattered to me. If that one woman or that one little girl says, "You're right, I have a voice. I am going to tell my parents, I don't like the way you're treating me because that's not who I am." Then that's all that matters to me, because that one has that ripple effect that will change many.
So true. So just as we wrap up, have if you could decide one takeaway for anybody listening, that one thing that they remember from listening to your story and from our short discussion here, what would that one thing be?
Is let your children have their voice. Don't stifle them. And I'm not just talking about their voice to say, hey, I want to go out and play or this and that. Find out who they really are. Find out their personality, because it could be totally different from yours, and understand them and listen. Really listen to what they're saying, because in that listening, there might be some message that you get and go, oh, and that might save their life.
Well, and at the end of the day, what's better than that is hearing that one thing that could save somebody's life.
Right, right. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Angel, so much for sharing your story here on the podcast, for being with us. And I know that there's more than one person out there that is going to walk away from listening to this and feel a different purpose, or feel changed, or wanting to change that relationship. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.